Alright, so I'm making this video on Rod's request. This is not going to be very in-depth. He needs help with Flash, manual Flash. So just a quick casual video. Alright, Rod, since I'm making this video for you. Alright, so night photography is, not night photography, Flash. Indoor Flash. Whether it's during the day or night, whenever you're using a speed light, I want to say it's somewhat similar to your night photography. Okay, in night photography, you've done a lot of night photography, so you're very familiar with this. You pick low ISO, and another thing that you know for certain is your depth of field. So when you're doing your landscape, you know you're not going to shoot a landscape at 2.8. Or 4.5, 5.6. You know, you're going to go with f11, f10, sometimes you go with f22. But one element that you mess with is your shutter speed in night photography, right? And that's how you pick your exposure. You're not going by what the light meter is telling you. You pretty much try different exposures, and whichever you like the best, you basically stick with that. When you're using speed light, it's very similar. So one thing you know for certain is that you're not going to increase your ISO. It's going to be, I do around 400. I could do 100, 200 even, 320. I don't do it because it just eats up a lot of your battery. So 400 is good. When I go full frame, most likely I'm going to increase that 400 to maybe even 800. Simply because I'm going to save on battery, and that 800 ISO, it's not going to show at all. The noise is not going to show on D700 or D3S, let's say. Anyway, so low ISO, and for me, when I'm photographing anything, I've done so many shoots, I know right away the type of depth of field that I want. Okay, so I am normally, unless light is really, really, really bad, then I'll go 2.8. But normally I'm above that. If you look at my pictures, you'll see that I'm, it's around 4, 4.5, sometimes even 5. I like sharpness, and as far as the bokeh is concerned, I can easily achieve that through zoom or by staying close to my subject. Anyway, I think I'm getting really off track. So low ISO, and then I pick my shutter speed. My shutter speed is normally, depending on the size of the room, if the light is really, really bad and it's a big hall, like the walls are really far apart, 1/25th of a second, and if it's really bad, I go 1/80th of a second. There was one event I shot where the ceiling was black. Disaster. I went with 1/60th of a second. I had to gamble. I mean, the light was just terrible. Anyway, start off with 1/25th of a second, and if the room is really small, go with 1/250th of a second, or maybe 1/200, depending on your camera. It's not going to make a huge difference because you are exposing your subject through this. The shutter speed is basically controlling your ambient light, which is going to be what's going to be in your background. So if I photograph this, there's not much of a background here because it's going to capture this, and this speed light is basically going to expose this whole area. So there's not much of a background. But if I were to photograph, let's say, somebody standing here, you put the person right here on one side, and the other side you leave it your negative space, then that area here is pretty much controlled through your shutter speed. So if I shoot at 1/60th of a second, this area here, the background area, it's going to be, it's going to have more light. Versus if I increase the shutter speed to 2/50th of a second, this area here is going to be darker. Okay, and the exposure on your subject is pretty much I control through my speed light, and it's just like doing night photography, but you're controlling the exposure through your shutter speed. In this, all you're doing is you're controlling it through the power. Full power is 1/1. Then you have another full stop is half power. You're basically dropping down the power, and then you have your 1/4, then you have your 1/8, and you can also do flash compensation, just like we have exposure compensation in 1/3. So, all right, let me show you that real quick. Turn it on. It is on. All right, okay, come here. All right, how do I know what power to select? I just know this because regular 10-foot ceiling like this, 1/4 power will do it. I have white, ugly ceilings. You can see the popcorn. So 1/4 power I know is good. But here's the thing, 1/4 power is good for someone who's standing. Like let's say you're doing a portrait, like you have friends over or whatever. Back off a little, KK. Sorry. Like 1/4 will be perfectly fine for someone my height or taller. I mean, I know I'm short, but you know, you're gonna get the right exposure, 10-foot ceiling. But here, if you look at my subject, it's further below your normal height, you can say. So I know 1/4, it will do it, but it's not going to be, it may be slightly underexposed. So in a situation like that, all you do is just increase the flash power. So if you go from 1/4 to 1/2, which is a full stop, it's going to get overexposed. There's no doubt about it. So what do? If you can't do entire stop, you can do in 1/3 stop. So 0.3, and if you think 0.3 is not enough, you can increase it and make it, sorry, and you can make it 0.7, and you could do the same with half power. If you think half power is too strong for whatever you're photographing, you can reduce the power down just a little by 1/3 stop, 2/3, 1 full stop. So that's basically it. You take a picture. So let's say you take a picture at 1/2 power. You look at it. You don't like the exposure because it's too bright. You reduce the power. You go, and if you think 1/2 is almost there, it's just a little too powerful, just dial it down a little. You don't have to go entire stop to 1/4. All right. So that's it, and hopefully in a couple weeks I'll do an actual flash tutorial where I'll talk about, you know, a few other things. I think I discussed most of it anyway, so hope this helps, and you have an entire week without your wife. So have fun.